Have you ever walked out of a high-stakes strategy meeting at a multinational company and you sit back down at your desk?
Oh, absolutely.
Right, you look at your meticulous notes and you realize you have absolutely no idea what your boss actually expects you to do.
Yes, it's a classic scenario.
You're a seasoned professional, you know your industry inside and out, and yet there you are, staring at a page of incredibly vague directives.
Wondering if you just got assigned a massive overhaul of a project or...
Exactly. Or if you were merely, participating in some theoretical brainstorming exercise.
It is a pervasive dynamic.
Mhm.
And frankly, it's one of the most hidden drains on productivity in the modern corporate ecosystem.
It really is.
You leave the room thinking, am I supposed to rewrite that entire strategy document by tomorrow? Or was my manager just making a casual observation about the market?
Yeah, and navigating that ambiguity requires a tremendous amount of cognitive energy.
A huge amount.
And that cognitive energy drain is exactly what we're dissecting today, so welcome to our deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are looking at a really fascinating stack of source material. We've got notes, organizational behavioral studies, and articles that basically deconstruct the nuances of modern workplace communication.
It's quite a collection.
It is. And our mission today is to treat this deep dive as a sort of, well, a sophisticated translation matrix for corporate manager speak.
I like that framing.
Thanks. We want to move beyond the surface level and really unpack the architecture of indirect communication.
Right, looking at the structural reasons why leaders speak in riddles.
Exactly. The cultural forces driving that ambiguity and the specific tactical maneuvers you can use to extract clarity without, violating office norms.
Because you definitely don't want to do that.
No, you don't. Okay, let's unpack this. What is the foundational driver behind a manager's instinct to obfuscate a simple directive?
Well, if we look closely at the source material, the root cause is essentially a deeply ingrained risk mitigation strategy.
Okay.
The texts refer to this as the politeness filter.
The politeness filter.
Right. In a complex corporate environment, managers are acutely aware that their words carry disproportionate weight, because of the power dynamic.
Sure, they're the boss.
Exactly. So they deliberately employ indirect language to soften the edges of their authority. The goal is to avoid sounding authoritarian, or overly critical, or blunt.
Because bluntness is bad.
Bluntness is increasingly viewed as a liability in modern management theory, yes.
Which, that makes sense on paper. The source material actually provides a really stark contrast to illustrate this.
It does.
Imagine a scenario where you submit a quarterly deliverable and your manager hands it back with a simple direct command. They just say, "This report is bad. Fix it."
Wow. Just hearing those words in a professional context triggers an immediate visceral reaction.
It hurts.
It's highly aggressive. Now, in the short term, yes, the directive is perfectly
I
clear,
know exactly what you need to do.
but the collateral damage to the employee's morale
Yeah.
and their psychological safety is immense. That kind of phrasing feels less like a professional critique and more like a direct attack on the employee's core competence.
And let me push back a little here. Isn't there an argument to be made that the modern alternative creates just as much stress? Maybe even more.
How so?
Well, the sources note that instead of saying, "This report is bad," a manager will run it through that politeness filter and say something like, "Maybe we could revisit this section."
Right.
Or it might help to adjust the structure a bit. As an employee trying to execute, those softeners, words like maybe and might they, feel incredibly dangerous.
Dangerous in what way?
They introduce a layer of interpretation that just wasn't there before. Am I being told to do it, or is it a suggestion?
And that is the central tension the source material explores. The soft language is performing a dual function.
Okay.
On one hand, it acts as a shock absorber for the ego. It preserves the working relationship.
Which is good.
But on the other hand, it requires the listener to possess a highly calibrated ear for subtext. The critical takeaway here is that the gentle phrasing is actively masking a non-negotiable demand.
So it's not optional.
Not at all. When your manager suggests, maybe we could revisit this section, they are not floating a hypothetical scenario for your consideration.
Right.
They are issuing a definitive mandate. Please fix this part.
Which leads us directly into another fascinating concept from the research, the illusion of collaboration.
Yes.
It seems like this isn't just about protecting egos, it's about fundamentally rebranding the nature of authority itself.
Precisely. Modern leadership frameworks heavily emphasize participatory management.
Everyone gets a voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Leaders are trained that optimal outcomes are achieved when the team feels intrinsically motivated and involved in the decision-making process.
Right, rather than feeling like subordinates executing orders from an autocrat.
The source illustrates this shift perfectly. It compares the traditional, highly direct command, simply telling an employee, do this, with the modern, collaborative alternative.
Right, instead of do this, the manager asks, what do you think about trying this approach?
What's fascinating here is the grammatical camouflage.
Grammatical camouflage, I love that term.
An explicit, top-down instruction is masquerading as an open-ended inquiry. By ending the sentence with a question mark, the manager is artificially framing the interaction as a peer-to-peer discussion.
Like we're just two colleagues hashing it out.
It implies a democratization of the workflow. However, given the structural reality of the corporate hierarchy, it is a suggestion that you are fully expected to embrace and execute.
It's entirely theatrical. They're asking for your thoughts, but the underlying subtext is, I have decided we are taking this approach and I am framing it as a question so you feel a sense of ownership over the labor.
Yes, exactly.
If you take the question literally and respond with, actually, I think that approach is flawed and I would prefer not to do it, you are going to find yourself in a very difficult position very quickly.
That is the trap of the collaboration illusion. The indirect style is engineered to make the conversation feel egalitarian, smoothing over the inherent friction of a boss telling an employee what to do.
It makes a command feel like a consensus.
But the moment you attempt to exercise the choice that was seemingly offered to you, the illusion shatters, and the underlying power dynamic reasserts itself.
So we are dealing with a system where clarity is routinely sacrificed at the altar of harmony.
That's a great way to put it.
Which brings up an interesting dynamic regarding the actual vocabulary we use in these spaces. The source material outlines a sort of hidden meaning phrase book.
The corporate lexicon.
Exactly. Now, for anyone who has been in the corporate world for a few years, we all know these phrases. We know they are polite brush-offs. But I want to explore the mechanics of why these specific phrases are the chosen vehicles for corporate evasion.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the first one from the text. You pitch an initiative, and the manager nods and says, let's think about this a bit more.
According to the realities of manager speak outlined in the sources, the empirical translation is, this idea isn't ready yet.
So why use that specific phrasing? It sounds so incredibly proactive. Let's think about it. Implies future action.
It does.
It implies a shared cognitive load, as if we were both going to take this away and ponder it. Why not just say this needs more work before we can proceed?
It comes back to risk mitigation and the conservation of energy.
Conservation of energy.
Yes. If a manager says this needs more work, they are inviting an immediate defense.
Oh, right.
The employee might ask, which part needs work? What specifically is missing?
And suddenly you're in a debate.
Suddenly, the manager is dragged into a detailed, potentially combative, impromptu coaching session that they do not have the time or bandwidth for.
That makes total sense.
By saying, let's think about this a bit more, they elegantly hit the pause button on the momentum of the pitch without formally rejecting the employee. It diffuses the immediate pressure of the conversation.
Building on that concept of diffusing pressure, here's where it gets really interesting. The text highlights what might be the most notorious phrase in the corporate lexicon.
I think I know what's coming.
You propose a solution to a problem, and the response is, interesting idea.
As the source translates it, interesting idea almost universally means, I'm not convinced.
When you are early in your career, that phrase is a psychological minefield. You present something, you hear interesting, and you genuinely believe you have captured their attention.
You think you've won them over.
But in reality, interesting is merely a placeholder. It is a linguistic void. Why is this particular word so heavily utilized by leadership?
Because it is the ultimate non-committal validation. Interesting acknowledges the act of speaking without endorsing the content of the speech.
It validates the effort.
It validates the employee's effort to contribute, which satisfies the modern mandate for collaborative leadership, while simultaneously committing the manager to absolutely zero follow-through.
Wow.
It is a highly efficient way to say, I hear you, but I do not agree with you, and I am not going to allocate resources to this.
It allows the manager to exit the conversation with their politeness filter completely intact.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the third classic phrase from our source material. An employee brings up a complex topic or a systemic complaint, and the manager deploys the ultimate organizational shield. Let's circle back to that later.
The translation provided by the text is unambiguous. We're probably not going to do that.
This one fascinates me because it is so universally understood as a burial tactic by experienced professionals, yet it remains in heavy rotation. If we all know it means no, why is it still so effective?
It is effective because it kicks the can down the road.
I,
And in a fast-paced corporate environment, the road is very long and full of distractions.
that's true.
The manager recognizes that addressing the topic in the moment will require a difficult conversation and potentially spark resentment.
So they just delay it.
By promising to circle back, they remove the immediate friction. The brilliance of the phrase is that it relies on the sheer volume of corporate workflow to naturally erase the issue.
People just forget.
9 times out of 10, everyone gets so overwhelmed with other deliverables that the item meant for the circleback file is completely forgotten.
It is a fascinating shared delusion. The insiders know exactly what these phrases mean, but the source material pushes this analysis significantly further.
It does. It goes macro.
Right. This isn't just about individual managers lacking the courage to be direct. We are looking at a much deeper structural issue rooted in macro-level cultural communication styles, correct?
Yes, and this is where the dynamic becomes truly complex, especially for anyone navigating a multinational organization.
Definitely.
The deep reliance on softened phrases and polite evasion is heavily dictated by cultural frameworks regarding authority and interpersonal harmony. The source text explicitly contrasts direct versus indirect cultural communication norms.
Let's explore that contrast. The text points out that in certain cultures, and we often see this in Northern European business environments, for example, it is entirely normal, and in fact expected, to be completely blunt.
Efficiency is the paramount virtue there.
Right?
In a direct communication culture, the primary objective of any business interaction is the rapid, unvarnished transfer of accurate information.
So if a project is failing,
If a project is failing, a manager operating within this cultural framework will simply observe the work and state, "This doesn't work."
and crucially, as the source implies, the employee on the receiving end of this doesn't work does not experience a crisis of confidence.
Not at all.
They don't view it as a personal attack, which is exactly how it might be perceived in a different culture.
Exactly. The relationship and the task are completely decoupled in a direct culture. A critique of the deliverable is just that data regarding a document.
It's just business.
It has zero bearing on the manager's personal estimation of the employee's worth. The mutual understanding is that we are here to optimize the work, and bluntness accelerates optimization.
But the text draws a sharp distinction when moving into environments heavily influenced by indirect communication norms.
It's a completely different rulebook.
In many corporate cultures, whether influenced by broader societal norms in parts of Asia, the UK, or even certain regions of the US, the primary objective shifts.
Right.
It is no longer purely about the unvarnished transfer of data. It is equally, if not more, about maintaining the integrity of the interpersonal network.
In indirect environments, the prevailing philosophy is that long-term organizational success depends entirely on the cohesion and harmony of the team.
You can't just go around upsetting people.
You cannot sustain high productivity if the social fabric of the office is constantly being frayed by blunt critiques. The relationship is not decoupled from the task. The relationship is the foundation that allows the task to be completed.
That makes a lot of sense.
Therefore, the harsh reality of "this doesn't work" represents a direct threat to the ecosystem. It must be heavily modified.
And the source provides a brilliant illustration of this modification. We watch the direct phrase, "this doesn't work," literally morph into an entirely different linguistic construct.
Amazing to see.
It becomes, I wonder if we could explore another direction.
It is a masterpiece of indirect engineering. Look at the framing, I wonder. The manager is actively downgrading their own authority.
Presenting a definitive mandate as a mere musing, a gentle curiosity.
Yes, yet the operational reality is identical to the direct culture's approach. The project is dead, and the employee must start over from scratch.
It requires so much bandwidth to process.
It really does.
Just imagine it. You have a multinational team where a manager from an indirect culture is using phrases like, "I wonder if we could explore another direction," to manage an employee from a direct culture.
Oh, that's a recipe for disaster.
The direct employee takes it literally and thinks, "Sure, you can wonder about that, but my current direction is fine." The friction there is immense.
That cross-cultural friction is responsible for countless missed deadlines and strategic failures.
I can imagine.
The direct employee assumes the indirect manager is indecisive or weak, while the indirect manager assumes the direct employee is arrogant or insubordinate.
When really they're just missing each other entirely.
They are speaking the same language, but utilizing entirely incompatible decoding mechanisms.
So what does this all mean? If you are the listener sitting in the middle of this matrix dealing with politeness filters, collaboration illusions, and indirect cultural mandates, how do you practically navigate it?
You need a strategy.
The sources don't just leave us with a diagnosis, they provide a tactical path forward. How do we extract the hard data we need without rupturing the delicate social fabric of the office?
The initial phase of the action plan outlined in the texts requires a fundamental shift in how you process auditory information in the workplace.
Okay, a shift in processing.
You must consciously train yourself to listen for intent rather than literal meaning. If you are operating in an indirect environment, you have to retire your literalist tendencies.
We have to accept that conditional language from leadership is almost never conditional.
Never.
If a manager casually mentions, maybe we should revise this, we have to cognitively translate that maybe into a must. Because if you treat their politeness as actual optionality, you are functionally ignoring a direct order.
Precisely. The baseline assumption must be that any suggestion regarding your workflow from a superior is a mandate wrapped in protective packaging.
Right.
However, the source text acknowledges a very real vulnerability here, the gray area.
A gray area.
What happens when the manager actually is just brainstorming? What if they genuinely don't want you to overhaul the project, but they're just thinking out loud?
Oh, that's tough.
If you automatically assume every vague thought is a mandate, you will burn yourself out executing tasks that were never actually assigned.
And this is where the source material delivers what I think is the most actionable piece of advice in the entire stack.
It's very practical.
It provides a precise, targeted tactic for neutralizing ambiguity. You do not have to sit at your desk guessing and hoping you deciphered the code correctly. You deploy a very specific, clarifying question.
The mechanism is elegantly simple. When you feel caught in the web of indirect suggestions, you look at your manager and you deploy this exact phrasing from the text. Just to confirm, would you like me to update this section?
Let's analyze why, just to confirm, would you like me to update this section, is such a strategically brilliant response, because it does a lot of heavy lifting under the surface.
It is highly effective for two specific reasons. First, it honors the politeness filter. It is entirely professional and deferential.
You aren't being rude.
You are not challenging the manager's communication style, nor are you pointing out that they were being vague, which would cause them to lose face. You are simply stepping up to take ownership of the deliverables.
And the second reason.
Second, and most importantly, it forces a structural shift in the conversation. It takes a nebulous, indirect musing and distills it into a binary proposition.
You are respectfully backing them into a corner.
Basically.
By asking, would you like me to update this section? You leave them no room for further evasion. They are forced to provide a concrete yes, please do, or a definitive no that isn't necessary right now.
Exactly. You strip away the ambiguity without stripping away the harmony. By utilizing this clarification tool, you eliminate the massive inefficiency of misunderstandings.
Which saves time.
You protect your own bandwidth by ensuring you aren't spending the weekend revising a report that didn't actually require a revision. Simultaneously, you demonstrate to your leadership that you are detail-oriented, proactive, and committed to precise execution.
You allow the manager to maintain their preferred collaborative, soft-spoken persona, but you systematically extract the rigid data points you require to advance your career. It is a phenomenal mechanism for managing up.
It truly changes the landscape of your professional interactions. Once you understand the underlying mechanics of why people communicate this way, once you see the cultural pressures and the liability concerns driving the vagueness, you stop feeling frustrated by it.
It's just a game.
You simply recognize it as a system, and you apply the correct tools to navigate that system.
It completely reframes the narrative. So, to synthesize the insights from our source material today, the fundamental reality of the modern corporate environment is that managers rarely say exactly what they mean.
Very rarely.
Their language is heavily processed through cultural and organizational filters designed to mitigate conflict and project an aura of collaboration. But their underlying intent is highly legible if you learn to interpret the subtext.
By mastering this analytical approach, by translating interesting idea as a polite decline, and recognizing that maybe we should is an absolute imperative, you drastically reduce your own cognitive load.
Which is the goal.
You remove the guesswork, accelerate your response times, and operate with a much higher degree of strategic confidence.
You will never again find yourself staring at a notepad in a post-meeting panic. When the ambiguity arises, you simply deploy the clarification protocol. Just to confirm, would you like me to do this? That one sentence is an absolute necessity for surviving the complexities of corporate communication.
Understanding the theory is excellent, but applying the tactical clarification is what actually moves the needle on your daily productivity.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to analyze, something that turns the lens around. We have spent this entire deep dive deconstructing how managers utilize indirect communication to shield themselves from liability and preserve relationships.
Right.
But take a critical look at your own daily interactions. If indirect language is the default mechanism for preserving social harmony, how often are you deploying these exact same cryptic phrases with your own peers and cross-functional teams?
That's a great point.
And, more importantly, what is your own polite, protective vagueness ultimately costing your organization in lost efficiency?
It is incredibly easy to diagnose the frustrating ambiguity in others, but recognizing our own reliance on the politeness filter requires a high degree of self-awareness.
A vital question to consider before you log into your next collaborative brainstorm. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the hidden architecture of workplace communication.
It has been a fantastic analysis. Keep questioning the subtext and always confirm the directive.
We will see you on the next deep dive.